Hello guys, tonight we're going to drift slowly, softly, back through the veils of time to a world you think you know, but perhaps do not. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from? What time is it for you? I always find it so comforting to imagine us all, scattered across cities, forests and sleeping towns, yet gathered here, wandering through the past together. Leave a comment and let me know if you'd like. Now, get cozy. Wrap yourself in your blanket, sink a little deeper into your pillow. Let the world grow quieter around you. Take a long, gentle breath and settle in. Tonight, you're not here in your room. Tonight, you're somewhere else entirely. Tonight, you will walk the muddy lanes and dimly lit halls of the real Middle Ages, not the glittering kingdom of movies, nor the endless battlefield of Hollywood epics, but a stranger, quieter and harder world. A place of rough linen and smoke-filled cottages, damp fields and prayers whispered by candlelight. You will see how life was lived when iron rusted quicker than it could be polished, when the shine of armour was rarer than the smell of wood smoke in your clothes. You're here now. Imagine you stand at the edge of a village. It is dusk, always dusk in these stories, because dusk softens the edges of what is harsh. The air is cool and smells of earth and something faintly sour. A mix of animals, wet straw, the distant tang of wood fires. You shift your feet on the packed dirt path. Beneath you, the road is rutted, marked by the passage of cartwheels and hooves. Your shoes are simple leather, cracked from rain, and you feel the cold creeping through the seams. No metal sabatons gleam on your feet. They never did. Behind you lie fields, thin strips of farmland, a patchwork of stubble and mud. Perhaps you work there today, bending to cut barley or haul stones from furrows. Your back aches in a way that is familiar, accepted, unquestioned. Work ends when daylight ends, and dusk is a blessing, though tomorrow you will rise again with the first bird call. You look ahead. The village is no tidy row of thatched cottages like you've seen in children's books. It is a huddle of rough wooden houses, leaning low-roofed, patched with reeds and mud. Smoke curls from gaps in thatch, drifting into the violet sky. There is no clear main street, just foot-worn paths weaving between pens for pigs and chickens, piles of firewood, a shallow ditch that tries and fails to carry waste away. A dog barks somewhere, a lean, wary shape, more wolfish than friendly. A child squeals, chasing a chicken that has escaped its coop. In the distance, a bell tolls, not a grand cathedral's chime, but the dull, cracked iron of the village church, calling people to mark the hour for evening prayers. Tonight, you are not a knight. You wear no polished breastplate or velvet cloak. You wear rough wool over a linen shirt patched and mended at the elbows. Your hands are calloused, your nails rimmed with soil. Maybe you smell faintly of sheep's lanolin, or the stale tang of sweat that soap can never quite chase away. There is no glamour in this, but there is something real, and in the quiet, there is something beautiful. As the sun sinks lower, you step off the path. A neighbour nods to you, a toothless smile in the dimness. You nod back, mumble a greeting neither of you fully hear. Words are precious here, voices low, laughter soft. The world is harsh enough without too much noise to stir it up. You push open the creaking wooden door to your cottage. The air inside is warmer, close, thick with the scent of smoke and old straw. A single rushlight flickers. Somewhere in the shadows your family huddles near the hearth. The fire is small, just enough to cook a thin broth. You shrug off your cloak, not a cloak fit for a lord, but a scrap of rough wool smelling of wet wool and old rain. You sit down, cross-legged, and stretch your fingers to the warmth. Outside, the real Middle Ages sighs into night. No battles rage beyond the village gates tonight. Not every day is war, despite what the songs say. No gallant knights thunder by on polished steeds. Tonight, there is only the soft crackle of the fire, the muffled cough of your child, the steady drip of rain from the eaves, and here, in this dim, smoky room, you close your eyes and drift further into this forgotten world. You sit for a while, feeling the warmth seep slowly into your hands. The rough wool of your tunic scratches your skin, but you barely notice. You're used to it, the same way you're used to the draft that slips through the gaps in the timber walls, or the low, damp smell that clings to everything when the rains come. In this small room, under this low roof, the rest of the world feels very far away. You glance around the single room that holds almost all of life's pieces. The flickering rushlight throws soft shadows onto the packed earth floor. There is no polished floor of stone or tiled hearth here, just trodden dirt, scattered with rushes and straw to soak up what leaks or spills. A few battered pots hang by the hearth. A wooden bench leans against one wall. A rough bed, little more than a frame stuffed with straw and covered in worn blankets, takes up the other corner. You notice how small the fire is. Wood costs, not in coins alone, but in effort, in hours spent scouring nearby copses and hedgerows for fallen branches. Trees do not stand in great forests just waiting to be chopped. Many have been cleared already for pasture and farmland. Each splinter of firewood comes at a cost, and so the flames are kept small, carefully fed, carefully watched. You settle closer to the hearth, hearing the soft crackle, the tiny pops of sap. Beside you, someone stirs, a younger brother perhaps, or your own child. They curl closer to the warmth. You see the faint glint of their eyes in the firelight, and you wonder if they dream of shining nights or castle walls too. You know better, or perhaps you know differently. Outside, the rain has started to fall more steadily. You can hear it drumming softly on the thatch overhead, a calming, steady sound. Water finds its way in, always. A slow drip in one corner where the reeds have shifted, a damp patch spreading across the timber. Someone will climb up tomorrow, if the weather clears, to patch it with new reeds cut from the river's edge. As you listen to the rain, you think of those stories people tell, of noble lords who dine in stone halls so vast they echo with laughter and song, of knights who polish their armour until it blinds the sun, of peasants, dirty and bent-backed, bowing and scraping in the mud, so poor they can barely speak. The truth is quieter, stranger. It slips through the cracks like the rain, not so easily caught, not so easily told. Armour, for one, is precious, too precious for everyday use. Most men you know will never touch a breastplate, let alone own one. A full suit of plate is worth more than a peasant's lifetime of earnings, and so armour is locked away, brought out only when truly needed, for battle, for a show of force, or for the grand parade of a lord's retinue. Even knights wear padded gambesons, thick layers of stitched linen and wool for daily patrols or guard duty. Mail rusts quickly in the damp. Plate must be polished, oiled, kept from the rain and the smoke that fills houses like yours. No one rides through your village in shining steel tonight. If any soldier passes, he will wear a cloak damp with rain, his sword wrapped to keep it from rusting. His boots will be caked with mud, his hands chapped and raw. He's closer to you than to the painted heroes of tapestries. Just another man, trying to keep warm, trying to keep his belly full. You think of war too, how people believe it was endless, the land forever echoing with trumpet blasts and the thunder of hooves. Yet here, in this village, wars come and go like storms on the horizon. They pass over, sometimes leaving ruin, sometimes missing you altogether. The real battle is with the soil, with the weather, with the illnesses that slip through crowded cottages faster than any sword. You shift on the bench, feeling the warmth fade as the fire burns low. Someone adds another stick. You watch the sparks leap and die. There is no feast tonight, just a bowl of thin pottage, maybe a crust of bread if you're lucky. No goblets of wine, no endless platters of roast meat. The stew tastes of onions and a hint of salted pork, just enough to warm your belly, not enough to fill it. You eat slowly, savouring every spoonful. In the dim, your family murmurs softly. Not grand conversation, but the small exchanges of a life spent close together. Above you, the beams of the roof creak in the wind. Beyond the walls, the rain falls. The village settles deeper into night. A world without the glow of street lamps, without the hum of distant traffic. Just the hush of rain, the whisper of breath, the occasional bark of a dog chasing shadows. When the fire has burned low enough that the room is more shadow than light, you shift away from the warmth and lie down on the straw-stuffed bedding. It pricks through the thin blanket, but you pull another worn cloth around your shoulders and listen to the breathing of those closest to you. The damp earth floor holds the cold like a secret. Tomorrow you'll rise with the faint blue of early light, but tonight you let your mind drift further, out through the door, along the village paths that twist between huts and barns, and the small huddled church that stands a little apart, its single bell now silent in the rain. The church is simple, no soaring spires or stained glass windows like the ones told of in grand tales. It's mostly timber, patched with stone where the old walls still stand. Inside, the air smells of old wax and damp wood. The village priest lives just beside it, in a house not much finer than your own, though his table might carry a better loaf of bread or a jug of ale paid as a tithe from families like yours. He can read, a thing that marks him out, that gives him power here where most can't even sign their names, a few bits of Latin, a holy book, the words he speaks on Sundays or when someone dies, or when a child cries in the night and you wonder if it's the fever again, the one that took your neighbour's youngest last winter before the first thaw came. In this small world, the church is not just faith, it is a storehouse for small hopes, a place where the village gathers to hear news that drifts in with travellers, to murmur prayers for good harvests, to mark the seasons that pass more by the turning of the fields than by any page in a book. Outside the church, graves lie scattered in uneven rows, stones leaning, earth sinking where coffins rest shallow beneath the soil. They remind you that life here is short and tightly wound with death, not in grand battles with swords clashing and banners flying, but in slow fevers, in births that go wrong, in cold that creeps through the cracks and settles in the bones of the old. You think of those who tell stories of the peasants, always painted as filthy wretches, stooped in endless toil. It is true, you work hard, and your hands crack in winter, your skin rough with dirt that soap can't scour clean, but there is more to your life than drudgery. There is the tilt of your neighbour's grin when the ale is good, and the harvest promises fair. There is the muddy festival in the next village when the first lambs are born and the sun feels warm enough to dry the fields. There is the quiet pride in fixing a broken plough, in mending a roof before the rain comes. It is not heroic in the way the songs tell it, but it is a life, and sometimes it carries laughter as easily as it does sorrow. Beyond your village, the manor stands on slightly higher ground. It is not the vast stone castle of painted scenes, but a squat hall, timber and daub, ringed by a rough palisade and a ditch that fills with rainwater in these wet months. The lord lives there, a man you've seen only a few times, mostly at harvest, when dues are counted and disputes settled. He is not the jewelled king of a minstrel's rhyme. His clothes are finer, his horse bigger and better fed, his boots not so worn. But even he lives closer to the earth than the bards might have you think. His table is broader, his stew thicker, his fire larger. But the winds still slip through the shutters, and in harsh seasons even the lord's household tightens belts and worries over stores of grain. Sometimes, when the roads are safe, merchants pass through, bringing cloth dyed in colours brighter than anything you could make from onion skins or woad. They carry news too, word of kings at odds, of armies gathering on distant fields you will likely never see. These stories fall from them like coins from a purse, glittering but hard to grasp. They speak of knights with banners streaming behind them, of city streets where the shops spill spices into the air, of ships with sails as wide as meadows bringing salt, wine and sometimes plague. You listen with half a mind. The tales are bright, but they drift away like smoke when you wake to frost on the thatch and a leaking roof that needs fixing. Still, the news reminds you that your small village is not the whole world. Somewhere far beyond the last hedgerow, the roads wind toward market towns, and beyond those, cities where stone walls hold back the wild and the wealthy display their silks in candlelit halls. Yet even there, life is not all banquets and minstrels. Stone castles are cold in winter, draughty and echoing with the scurry of rats. The great kitchens are smoky, the courtyards muddied by hooves and rain. Servants scrub and sweep and carry buckets of waste down narrow stairs that stink in the heat of summer. There is wealth there, yes, but behind the banners and the tapestries is the same earth and wood smoke, the same struggle to keep warm and fed when the harvest fails or war comes too near. You lie on your straw bed and picture the roads that twist out from your village like the lines on your cracked palms, lines that connect your life to others you will never meet. The night deepens, the rain falls steadier, and the truth settles around you like the weight of the blanket you pull tighter. This is no fairy tale of steel and glory, but a life stitched together from hard work, borrowed warmth, and the small mercies that flicker like rushlights in the dark. Morning drifts in, not with any gentle sunlight through glass windows. There is no glass here, only shutters that creak when the wind pushes too hard, but with the hush of the rain softening into mist and the soft stirring of bodies waking on straw and rushes. You push yourself upright, your back stiff from a night spent half on the earth and half on what bedding you could gather. Your joints ache a little, but this is how it always is. The air is damp enough that your breath clouds for a moment as you pull on your coarse wool tunic, tugging it straight where the seams have begun to fray again. In a corner, someone stirs the embers of the hearth back to life, coaxing flame from last night's ash. The smell of smoke drifts low, mixing with the musty tang of old straw and damp cloth. You watch the pot swing over the rekindled fire, the thin pottage stirred with a wooden spoon that has seen so many mornings just like this one. A sliver of yesterday's bread is dropped in to soften. This is breakfast if you're lucky, a mouthful of warmth to hold in your belly while the work begins again. When you push open the rough door, the chill hits you first, then the smell, earth and smoke, the faint sour edge of manure where animals have been penned too long against the wet. You step into the village lane, which is not a neat cobblestone street but a rutted, trodden path of mud and old straw, and standing puddles that mirror the dull grey sky above. The cottages huddle close together, low roofs heavy with thatch that drips steadily in the mist. Chickens scratch at the damp ground, their feathers dull from rain. A pig squeals somewhere behind a wattle fence. Here, the village wakes not all at once but in ripples. One door creaks open, then another, the sound of soft greetings and the steady thud of wooden clogs in the muck. No trumpets greet you, no flags flutter from towers. This is not a kingdom painted with bright colours on parchment. It is a place where the day begins with the weight of chores waiting for hands to finish them. Your first steps take you toward the fields again. You pass the church, its timbers darkened by years of rain, the small graveyard at its side dotted with mounds where the grass never quite grows thick enough to hide the uneven earth. The bell hangs silent in its belfry. There will be no sermon this morning. The priest, if he's up already, will be bent over a scrap of parchment, copying out a borrowed prayer or tallying offerings of grain and eggs, counting what the village can spare for the poor. Though the truth is, here everyone feels poor most days. Past the church, the path turns muddy and thin hedges mark the edges of the fields. This strip of earth is yours to tend, though you do not own it, not really. It belongs to the Lord in the hall on the rise, the same man whose steward will come later in the season to measure what you've pulled from the ground, counting bushels and sheaves, always with a ledger you cannot read. What you keep feeds your family if luck holds. What is owed goes up the hill, to be turned into coin or ale or gifts that pass up the chain to greater men still, and so you bend your back to the work. Even now, in the soft drizzle, you take up a spade to turn the earth, feeling the chill seep through your boots as mud clings to your soles. There is something almost comforting in this labour. Your hands know what to do without your mind needing to wander far. The soil is heavy with yesterday's rain. You think of the tales that paint fields as empty, quiet places where peasants shuffle without thought or pride. But your work is not mindless. You know when the frost will come by, the way the wind smells at dusk. You know which furrow will flood if the ditch clogs with leaves. You know the turning of the seasons better than any calendar. You feel it in your bones, the subtle shift of birdsong, the way the sun hits your neck, the way your knees ache more when the weather changes. The world has taught you its signs in exchange for your labour, a fair trade in its own hard way. As you work, your thoughts stray to the village around you. It is small, yes, but not without its murmured stories and quiet scandals. Someone's cow wandered into another's strip of field last week. An argument will simmer until the priest or the steward settles it. There are whispers that a travelling tinker brought word of new taxes to come. You do not yet know if this is true or just the way rumours feed themselves when the nights are long and the ale runs thin. Sometimes, when the work slows or the ground freezes too hard to till, you gather at the alehouse, which is no grand tavern with roaring hearth and flagons of frothy drink, but the low back room of a neighbour's cottage, where rough beer is brewed from barley that might otherwise feed mouths if times grow leaner. Here, gossip drifts like smoke above the simple mugs, laughter leaks out into the dark, and for a while, life feels less heavy. No bard sings here of golden kings or damsels locked in towers. The songs are simpler, tunes passed down, half-forgotten verses about lost sheep, foolish stewards, the stubbornness of frost that ruins crops too early in spring. These are the stories that matter more than the battles drawn in bright colours on noble banners far away. You pause your digging, leaning on your spade as the drizzle thickens. Across the fields, you see other bent figures, scattered like dark shapes against the pale morning mist. You know each by their gait, their headscarf, the shape of their shoulders. This is your world, bound by fields and family and a few rough paths leading out, always muddy, always waiting for someone braver, or more desperate, to follow them to towns where the streets might not be paved with gold, but at least with stone instead of mud. For now, you turn back to the earth, pressing your foot to the blade, lifting another clump of heavy soil to the air. The movies would show you swinging a sword, shining under a sun that never seems to set. But here, in this real Middle Age, your blade is iron. Yes, but forged not for war, but to break open the stubborn ground so that you and yours might eat. You work until the dull light lifts a little, the mist giving way to a softer grey that makes the outlines of the hedges and cottages clearer. By now your shoulders ache from the steady rhythm of turning the soil. You pause, wiping the back of your hand across your brow. The air still tastes of wet earth, of smoke drifting on the breeze from other hearths, where the rest of the village wakes to its own quiet struggles. Somewhere behind you, a thin dog barks, chasing crows from a cart track that cuts through the middle of the open fields. It's not much of a road, more a pair of ruts where wagon wheels have passed so often that grass won't grow back. This is how you travel when you do, not on stone-paved causeways or grand processions through city gates, but on these rutted lines that turn to rivers of mud in the rain, or to choking dust when the wind picks up in summer. You rest the spade against your shoulder and let your eyes follow the track toward the manor on the rise. From here you can just make out the paling fence, its wooden stakes leaning in places where storms have cracked the posts. Beyond that, the hall itself squats low against the sky, a cluster of steep roofs and timber walls dark with old tar to keep out the damp. Sometimes you imagine what it must be like inside, if it is warmer, if the floors are swept clean of rushes more often, if the bread is whiter and the meat thicker on the bone. But you know that even there the comforts are fragile. Stories drift down about noble quarrels over inheritance, about cousins turned rivals, about sons who drink too deep and spend the steward's careful hoard on foolish feasts that drain the stores before winter's end. Wealth exists, yes, but it is not the endless gold of the old tales. Even the Lord's Hall is not immune to the same slow rot that touches your roof beams when the damp settles in for weeks on end. You turn back to your furrow because the ground will not turn itself. Beside you, another pair of hands works the soil. A neighbour, maybe, or your oldest child grown tall enough now to shoulder some of the weight that once bent only your own back. You nod to each other but say little. There is comfort in the shared sound of spades slicing through wet earth. Words are saved for later, for the warmth of the cottage, for the alehouse hum when work is done. By midday you rest again, standing at the edge of the strip field where it runs up against a narrow hedge, alive with birdsong. You watch a small knot of figures move along the road, travellers by the look of their cloaks, muddied hems trailing behind boots crusted with yesterday's miles. They carry bundles tied with a rope, maybe peddlers with cheap tin pots or scraps of ribbon dyed bright enough to catch the eye of those who can spare a coin. News comes with them too, stories traded in low voices, half-truths that slip from village to village like drifting seeds. Sometimes they bring word of distant battles, but more often the stories are small. A village beyond the river struck by sickness, a marriage between two families who claim old blood, a rumour that the king's men have raised the tax again to pay for some new campaign you'll never see. You know enough now not to trust every tale. Some are born to be bigger than they were, stretched by wagging tongues and the need for a bit of wonder in the darkness of an ordinary night. Still, you listen when they come. The travellers will sleep in someone's barn tonight, share a bowl of pottage if they're lucky, slip away before dawn while the village still dreams on its damp straw beds. In the afternoon, the clouds break enough for a pale sun to glance down through torn gaps. You feel it on your shoulders, a small kindness that makes the work lighter for a moment. The spade digs easier where the soil begins to dry. You think of the old stories that show peasants as chained to the land, dull-eyed and bound to misery. Yet here in the open field, back bent and hands rough, you feel a kind of freedom too. The freedom to know every clod of earth, every stone that bruises the blade, every seed tucked down where the frost can't find it too soon. You know the worth of this strip of land. You know that it will fight you with weeds and hungry birds and sudden rains that flatten the young shoots, and you will fight back season after season with hands and sweat and the small wisdom that passes from one generation to the next, as stubborn and quiet as roots in the cold earth. By the time the sun dips again behind the clouds, you shoulder your spade and make your way back down the muddy track. The village greets you not with fanfare, but with the smell of hearth smoke and the low murmur of voices behind thin walls. Children's laughter spills out as they chase each other between the cottages, skirts muddied, faces ruddy from the bite of the wind. A neighbour nods to you, basket on her hip, chickens clucking at her feet. A dog trots past, nose low to the ground. This is not the kingdom of brightly polished swords and towering banners. It is something rougher and smaller, but real in a way no painted tapestry ever truly catches. Tomorrow you will wake and do it all again. There will be days when the soil breaks easy, and days when it will not yield at all. There will be hunger when the harvest fails, and simple feasts when it does not. There will be gossip and laughter and quiet prayers murmured over graves when the soil takes back what it once gave, and through it all you will stand here, hands cracked, tunic worn thin, eyes clear enough to see what the old stories forget, that the Middle Ages are not an endless clash of swords, nor a timeless darkness, but something far stranger and far more ordinary, the hard, stubborn heartbeat of life carried on backs bent to the turning earth. As dusk folds itself back over the village, you slip inside the cottage once more. The rushes on the floor are damp with tracked-in mud, and bits of straw cling to your boots. You set your spade near the door, careful not to knock it against the frame where the wood has softened from years of winter rains. Inside, the hearth glows again, not a grand fireplace with carved stone mantels, but a simple open pit with a hook for the battered iron pot that holds tonight's supper. The stew inside it is thin, flavoured by scraps of salt pork saved from the last slaughter. Thickened with whatever root vegetables were still good enough to keep from the cold cellar, you dip a crust of bread into the broth, softening it before your teeth tackle the tough edge. The warmth is a small mercy that sits in your belly while the wind whispers at the shutter cracks. Around you, voices blend into the hush of evening. There is no roaring laughter like the feasts sung of in ballads, no heavy goblets of wine clinking beneath bright banners, but there is a softer comfort in the closeness. A child leans against you, head warm where it rests on your shoulder. A cousin or neighbour shares word of a calf born too early, but living still. Someone hums a tune too old to name, something picked up at a distant fair or brought back by a wandering soul who traded stories for a night's dry corner in the hayloft. Outside the walls of your cottage, the wider world drifts further away. The movies would have you believe that war waits around every bend, that knights thunder down muddy roads each dawn, leaving villages trampled under hooves and spears. But here, in this small place bound by fields and hedgerows, wars are rumours carried on the breath of strangers. You hear of them, yes. Sometimes a man from the village vanishes for a season, conscripted by a passing Lord Steward, drawn into a levy with the promise of coin or the threat of punishment if he refuses. He comes back if he's lucky, changed and quieter, telling only the barest scraps of what he saw. A camp stinking of mud and sweat, more sickness than swordplay, days waiting for a clash that ended as quickly as it began, if it came at all. For most, war is not clashing steel under banners, but the hush that falls when a rumour says a raid might come. It is the hidden loaf of bread, the roof beam braced tighter, the hope that the road stays empty of armoured men who take more than they give. Your village might see a tax rise before it ever sees the flash of a knight's armour. If fighting comes close, it is a fear that creeps in like cold, sudden, sharp, and gone again when the men move on, leaving behind charred thatch and trampled rows that will need replanting if there is still seed to spare. You shift your weight, adjusting so the child dozing on your shoulder does not stir. You think of armour, the shining steel suits that glimmer in painted stories, each plate polished like a mirror. You've never seen one in truth, not like that. If you have seen mail at all, it is battered, patched, a rough shirt of linked rings dragged out from a chest when danger threatens. It weighs heavy, too costly to wear without cause. No one rides to plough in gleaming steel. No one tends sheep or men's roofs in helmets topped with bright crests. Even the Lord's Guard wears armour that shows its dents and rust, proof of rain and the long seasons between battles worth the risk of donning iron that pinches skin raw if left on too long. The warmth of the hearth deepens as the last light fades from the small window. A rushlight burns low, its fat sputtering as the wick sinks deeper. Someone mends a tunic in the corner, stitching carefully by flickering light. The sound of the needle passing through cloth is a steady rhythm against the creak of the roof beams in the settling night. A cough breaks the quiet, sharp, then gone, but a reminder that sickness here is a more faithful visitor than any knight or king. When the stories speak of pestilence, they speak in numbers too vast to hold in your mind. Whole cities emptied, streets lined with carts piled with the dead, but here, plague means a child's fever that doesn't break by morning. It means a breath gone wet in the chest when the air grows cold. It means prayers muttered in the dark while the church bell stays silent, because a funeral is a cost not every family can pay with coin or clean linen for a shroud. Still, in the hush that settles over the hearth, you feel something like stubborn hope. The stories told in the flicker of the rushlight are not of bright battlefields, but of smaller triumphs. Of a barn rebuilt after a storm, of a cow carved healthy against all odds, of a neighbour's kindness when grain ran short and the steward's count was cruel. These are the victories that matter more than banners in the wind, small lights that hold back the dark in a world that never promised ease, but offers moments of warmth to those willing to make them. Tonight you let the crackle of the hearth fill the silence between words. Outside the rain has stopped, leaving the thatch dripping in soft rhythm onto the packed earth just beyond the door. Tomorrow the fields will wait again, and the road will still run past your village toward places you may never see. But for now, your world is here. In the damp rushes, the smell of smoke, the brush of a child's hand curling around your sleeve. A reminder that the real Middle Ages are neither all darkness nor all glory, but something stubbornly, beautifully human. When morning comes, you rise again before the sun has found the edge of the thatched roof. The cottage holds the ghost of last night's warmth, but the hearth has gone to ashes once more. You move slowly at first, stretching the stiffness from your back as your feet find the cold earthen floor. There is bread to break, coarse, dark, still holding a trace of the oven's heat if you're fortunate, but more often hard enough to need softening in ale or watered milk. A crust is torn and shared, handed down the row of sleepy faces that gather by the hearth. No fine goblets, no silver plates, only rough hands, wooden bowls, the hush of the morning broken by a few soft words and the scrape of a spoon against the bottom of the pot. Outside, the world glimmers under a pale sky. The mud has stiffened overnight where the frost licked at the ruts in the path. Chickens pick at the frost-hardened ground, feathers puffed against the cold. You step out into the lane again, no bustling market square, no stone-paved road echoing with the clatter of hooves. Only this thin stretch of trampled dirt that winds past cottages, past low wattle fences patched with spare twigs, past dung heaps waiting to be turned back into the earth that feeds you. It is quiet now, but for the lowing of a cow, the soft grunt of a pig stirring in its pen. Quiet, but never still. Life here never truly stops. Today you walk not to your strip of field, but toward the woods that lean dark and close at the edge of the open land. The forest is no deep enchanted realm like the stories say, not a place of lurking witches and wolves behind every twisted tree, but a place both feared and needed. The Lord claims it as his right, but everyone knows how to slip beneath its boughs when the steward looks the other way. Deadwood for the hearth, mushrooms in the damp months, hazelnuts in autumn, berries in bramble thickets that tear your sleeves and stain your fingers dark. And sometimes, if you're bold enough or hungry enough, a snare hidden off the main path to catch a hare before it darts back to its burrow. The forest greets you with its damp hush. Here the air feels older, close with the smell of rotting leaves and the sweet tang of moss where water beads on dark trunks. Sunlight filters through in thin spears, striping the leaf litter with pale gold that does not quite warm your skin. You listen as you walk, the creak of a branch overhead, the sudden flutter of wings, your own steps muffled in the deep mat of last year's fall. You carry a small axe, its head dull but good enough for dead branches, not for felling oaks that stand thicker round than your arms could circle. You have no right to the greenwood. Cut the wrong tree and the fine could cost a season's worth of eggs or worse, so you choose what no one will miss. broken limbs that will burn fast but well enough to keep the frost from your children's breath. As you gather your bundle, you pause a moment to watch the breath of the forest itself. The way the mist drifts low over brambles, the scurry of a rabbit startled by your presence, the soft drip of meltwater from branches that catch the weak sun above. There is no knight here in gleaming mail to rescue a lost soul, no huntsman in bright hose chasing stags through dappled clearings for sport. The chase, when it comes, is for survival, meat for the pot when the salted fish runs low, when the turnip sprouts soft eyes in the cellar, and the last crust of bread turns green with mould. Carrying your bundle back toward the village, you follow the worn path through undergrowth that parts with a sigh beneath your steps. You think of the old stories, the way the forest is painted as a place of monsters and magic, a dark danger to be tamed by brave men with bright swords. But for you, this wood is neither curse nor enchantment. It is part of the balance. It takes and it gives, as long as you know how not to ask too much. You have heard of poachers caught and strung up as warnings at the forest edge, yet you have also seen the steward's own men slip into the shade to set their snares where they hope no one sees. Hunger makes quiet thieves of everyone when the winter lingers too long. By the time the trees thin and the village roofs come into view again, the frost has begun to soften, the sun peeking out just enough to catch the steam from your breath. You shift your load on your shoulder and watch a line of smoke curl up from a distant chimney. Someone has stoked their fire early, perhaps an old widow who cannot bear the cold in her bones, perhaps a mother warming water for washing clothes, beating them clean against a stone at the stream's edge. You pass the same graveyard by the church, its mounds and crooked crosses familiar as the bend of the road itself. Here lie the ones who planted these fields before you, who bent their backs under the same grey sky, who gathered deadwood just as you do now. No grand tombs, no carved marble saints, only earth returning to earth beneath names that slip from memory like leaves drifting away on a thawed stream. Back at your door you pause to shift your bundle to the ground. You listen for a heartbeat, the hush of voices inside, the creak of the shutter stirred by a rising breeze. The day is only half begun. Soon there will be water to haul, flax to spin, maybe repairs to make where the thatch leaks worst when rain returns, and when dusk finds you again, you will sit by the same hearth, where the embers glow just bright enough to hold off the dark. No painted tapestry can catch this truth, that the real Middle Ages live not in the clang of swords, but in the slow, constant work of hands that know the weight of soil and wood and fire. You stand a moment at your threshold, the rough bundle of branches leaning against the wall beside you. The wind carries the smell of distant cooking fires, and somewhere further off, the muffled strike of a hammer against metal rings out from the blacksmith's small lean-to. You know the smith well enough, not a master armour forger churning out shining breastplates for noble knights, but a bent man with singed hair and arms corded with the strength of turning iron into nails, hinges, crude knives, and the occasional horseshoe. If someone in the village is lucky enough to own a mail shirt, chances are he's patched it, ring by ring, cursing under his breath when the links slip from his hammer's face. You nod to him when you pass, a greeting born more of habit than warmth, for everyone's mind hums with their own list of chores this time of day. The smith works by daylight, because lamp oil is precious, and daylight is free. He stands half in shadow, half in sun, his forge a pit of orange glow that breathes warmth into the chill that still clings to the yard between your cottages. Sparks spit from the anvil as he lifts and drops his hammer in a rhythm older than the language you speak. There is no spectacle here, no great roaring furnace with a line of knights waiting to fit for grand suits of shining armour. What armour there is in your world lives in pieces. A dented helm, a battered buckler, a few links of chain passed down, patched over generations, rust scraped away with vinegar or sand. You watch a boy by the smith's side work the bellows, his arms thin but determined, cheeks pink with the heat that bites at his face each time he leans close. Maybe he's the smith's own son, or a neighbour's boy learning a trade that promises hard work but steady bread. In the movies, the blacksmith stands as a maker of heroes' steel, a man whose anvil shapes destiny. Here, the truth is more humble. His hammer holds the village together not with swords but with ploughshares, with the simple iron tools that turn your strips of soil from cold waste to warm bread, season after stubborn season. You move on, bundle balanced on your shoulder again. the path beneath your boots more mud than dry ground. 2 cottages down, a woman stands with her arms plunged into a tub of water, gone grey with soap and grime. She lifts a linen tunic, slaps it against a flat stone, works it over with knotted knuckles that bear the red cracks of winter's cold. A little one clings to her skirt, thumb in mouth, watching you with wide eyes as you pass. Washing is not the fine work of servants tending silk gowns for kings and queens. It is the harsh work of scraping filth from coarse wool and rough spun cloth, hoping to beat out the fleas before they breed enough to keep you scratching through the night. At the well, you wait your turn behind an old man who leans heavy on the rope, pulling up a bucket that drips over the edge, leaving a ring of wet in the dust. The well is the village's lifeline. You know its depth by the creak of the rope, the cold splash echoing far below when the bucket strikes water. You trade a word with the old man, a muttered remark about the last frost, a nod toward the sky that might yet promise rain. There is no chatter of politics, no talk of kings and crusades. Here, politics lives in the steward's tally, in the measured bushels of grain you owe, in the whispered hope that the Lord's appetite for taxes stays as lean as last year's harvest. When your turn comes, you draw the bucket up hand over hand, your palms roar against the rough hemp. The water smells faintly of earth, cold enough to bite your wrists when you spill a bit as you pour it into your clay jar. You balance the jar on your hip, careful with each step back down the lane. A spill means another walk, another pull at the rope that cuts deeper into your skin the colder the wind blows. Back in your cottage yard, you stack the dead wood neat against the wall under a scrap of thatch where the rain runs off. You rub your hands together, blowing warm breath into your cupped palms. They are cracked, rimmed with fine lines of ground in dirt that never truly leave no matter how you scrub. These hands do not lift swords except in dreams, nor sign treaties, nor unfurl banners above cheering crowds. But they shape your world all the same, coaxing warmth from damp branches, hauling buckets, tending fields whose furrows hold the promise of a thin, stubborn life that the stories forget. Inside you hear a low murmur, your kin, perhaps, bent over a patch of linen by the window's pale square of light, eyes squinting to pull the thread through stubborn cloth. A cough breaks the quiet now and then. Nothing dramatic, just the steady reminder that cold and damp slip in through every chink in the wattle and daub. When illness comes, it does not wear a black cloak or swing a scythe like the painted woodcuts from distant towns. It comes as a slow ache in the bones, a rasp in the throat, a fever that flickers like a rushlight in a draught. You lean your shoulder against the rough timber of the doorway and watch a moment more. There is no shining armour here, no grand castles on every hill, no peasants bound in mindless drudgery, yet no wild freedom either. There is only the daily test of survival, carried out with hands, with small words, with the hope that tomorrow's work will be no worse than today's. If the movies showed you this, the damp floors, the cracked hands, the quiet strength that holds these cottages upright through winter storms, would you find it dull, or would you see it for what it truly is? The real weight of the Middle Ages stranger, plainer and harder than any song of knights and shining battles could ever tell. You step inside, ducking beneath the low lintel, letting the door settle into its place with a dull thud that shakes a few clumps of old thatch from the eaves. The air inside is close, warmer than the wind outside, but tinged with the smell of smoke that never quite finds its way up the narrow chimney. In one corner a small stack of rushlights waits, thin reeds dipped in leftover animal fat. They don't give much light, but enough to stitch by when the sun's gone or to chase the darkest corners away so the little ones don't startle at the groan of the roof beams. In the far end of the room, the hearth flickers. A pot rests on the stones, its iron sides dulled with years of soot. You stir its contents. A thin pottage today, barley grains bloated with water, a shred of salted fish, a pinch of herbs saved from the hedgerow last summer. The smell is humble, but fills the air in a way that settles the belly before the spoon even lifts. You ladle some into a wooden bowl, rough-edged from years of scrubbing. There are no servants here to tend a lord's high table, no pewter platters stacked with roasted birds or honey cakes. This meal is what it is, just enough to hold the ache at bay until tomorrow's dawn demands your back and hands once more. You eat slowly, watching the way the fire's glow bounces off the packed earth floor. Somewhere above your head, the rafters creak as the wind shifts. Between the beams, You know the thatch hides spiders, maybe a bird's old nest from spring, maybe even a mouse or two that will find its way down if you leave the bread uncovered. Small creatures share this house with you because there's no other way. The gaps between the walls let life in as much as they keep the worst of the cold out. It's easy to think that in a world of castles and keeps, every roof is tight, every hall warm, but most never see stone walls or sleep beneath a roof of slate. Stone is for churches, for manors that stand aloof on the rise above the village. Here, wattle and daub, wood and thatch, these are the bones that hold your world together. You watch the others finish their meal, a quiet affair, only the scrape of spoons and the soft murmur of a mother urging a child to eat every mouthful. A dog dozes near the hearth, ribs just visible beneath its scruff. Not a pet, not truly, more a watchful pair of eyes, a hunter of mice, a belly to be fed when scraps allow. It lifts its head as you shift, then lets it drop back onto its paws with a sigh that sounds almost human in this small space. When the bowls are empty, they're set aside, wiped clean with the heel of a crust too stale for chewing. Later, they'll be scrubbed with ash and water, left near the door where tomorrow's frost might find them before the morning does. You lean back against the wall, feeling the rough chill of the daub at your shoulder. Your eyes find the small chest in the corner, its iron hasp rusted at the hinge. If you open it, you'd find no gold, no treasure, just a handful of linen, maybe a bit of spare wool, a few coins if the steward hasn't taken every last penny in taxes this turn. This is your wealth. Cloth, salt, seed grain kept back no matter how the hunger gnaws at you come spring's edge. If there's more, it might be a relic. A chipped wooden cross, a ribbon from a fair long past, a lock of hair wrapped in cloth, saved from someone whose name is spoken only when the wind rattles the shutters and makes the old stories stir. Outside, dusk falls early this time of year. The sky bruises purple and grey. The damp settles deeper in the thatch. You know what the stories say, that these villages are all the same, dull places full of dull souls waiting for a knight or a king or a war to wake them up. But as you settle near the hearth, you know that life here has its own quiet pulse. It hums in the gossip traded over fence posts, in the whispered curses when the steward's men measure your grain too generously for their own pockets. It moves in the plans to mend the roof before the thaw brings leaks, in the worry for the sow heavy with her next litter, in the hope that the rains come soft enough not to drown the young sprouts when planting begins again. Sometimes, a travelling friar might pass through, his robes patched as much as your own sleeves, his feet bare or bound in cracked leather that leaks worse than yours. He'll stand by the church door, his words half prayer, half warning, reminding you of sin and salvation, of a life beyond this muddy yard and thin soup. You listen, you nod, you cross yourself when he lifts his hand, but your mind drifts back to the fence that needs mending, the axe that needs sharpening, the aches in your bones that no sermon ever soothes. You look at your hands, strong but thin, knuckles raw from rope and earth. These hands are your armour, your shield, your only sword against the hunger that crouches at the edge of each season. The movies might forget you, skip past this small life between the grand feasts and bloody fields, but here in this cottage, beside this flickering hearth, you know the truth, that the Middle Ages are built less by kings than by hands like yours, steady against the dark, stubborn enough to greet each dawn the same way, with work and hope and the hush of prayers that only sometimes find words. Night deepens around the cottage, pressing its damp fingers against the thatch as the last coals of the fire pulse soft and low. You shift closer to the hearth, listening to the breath of the room, the sigh of a child settling deeper under a coarse wool blanket, the faint drip of water from a crack in the roof where the thaw has found a path inside. There is no separate bedchamber here, no lofty four-poster hidden behind heavy curtains. The whole family sleeps in the same space, crowded near the warmth because the cold seeps through timber and daub like a silent thief. In the far corner, a straw mattress rests on a low frame of rough-hewn boards. Some nights you share it with others, a spouse, a child, maybe a sick elder whose cough stirs the dark. The straw is old and flattened, lumpy beneath thin blankets patched so many times you can trace the stitching like a map of small survival. If the movies showed this, they might skip past it in a single breath. No velvet sheets, no fur-lined robes, no flickering candlelight to cast soft shadows over polished stone walls, just bodies huddled close, warmth pressed together against the chill that never fully leaves these walls. When the fire gutters low, you rise stiffly, pushing the last scraps of deadwood into the embers. The flicker climbs for a moment, painting your shadow large against the rough walls. You think of the forest where that wood came from, how even the smallest twig gathered in secret keeps this hearth alive. Each branch burned is a debt you owe to the Lord's forest, a trespass forgiven only because the steward's eyes cannot see every corner of the undergrowth. Yet who could fault you when frost creeps under the door, when the children's breath ghosts pale in the dawn? Outside, the village lies hushed beneath a thin crust of snow. The fields sleep too, furrows frozen hard, waiting for the thaw that feels impossibly distant when you stand here, shoulder braced to the draught that slips beneath the door. Beyond the lane, the manor house looms like a rumour in the dark. A few narrow windows lit by tallow candles, perhaps, but no great blazing torches or iron braziers. Even the Lord counts his stores carefully through these long months. Salted meat, dried beans, wheels of cheese hoarded in cool cellars. His table may groan with more than yours, but hunger does not care for rank if the harvest fails, or if sickness finds the cattle in the barn. There is no constant war here, no clang of swords by moonlight. War is distant thunder, the call of levy men taken from fields they know too well, pressed into service they scarcely understand. They may fight in padded jacks and rusted helms patched by your village smith, not in gleaming armour fit for the hall of a baron's sons, and when they come home, if they come home, they return not as heroes draped in banners, but as men with scars that ache in the rain, men who take up the plough again because what else is there? You hear stories from travellers sometimes, peddlers who pause at the edge of the lane to hawk needles, ribbons, salt blocks carried in rough sacks. They speak of battles far off, names of kings and dukes tumbling like stones from their mouths. Yet the stories always fade beneath the weight of what must be done here. Fields to be turned, fences to mend, children to raise so they too might kneel at the furrows come spring. If glory lives anywhere, it is hidden in the simple promise that tomorrow's loaf will rise in the oven's heat, that the sheep will birth their lambs without too many lost to chill or fox. As you settle once more on the straw mattress, you pull the blanket close around your shoulders. The dog circles itself on the dirt by the hearth, finding the last warmth in the dying coals. Overhead, the wind rattles the loose shutter, a drop of water beads at the rafters, falls with a soft pat onto the packed earth floor. In that tiny sound lies the true echo of this time, not a clash of steel or the roar of a siege tower, but the hush of night, the weight of a roof that might yet hold through one more storm, and tomorrow, when dawn seeps cold and grey through the cracks, you will rise again. There will be bread to break, water to draw, a patch of fence to mend before the thaw turns the lane to sucking mud once more. There will be gossip by the well, a prayer murmured in the little church whose walls lean more than stand straight, a whisper of news from the steward's men about a new levy, a fresh tax, a rumour of far-off quarrels that will touch you only as another mouthful of grain measured from your store. This is no painted legend. This is the slow heartbeat of 1,000 villages, of fields turned under weak suns, of hands raw with frost and soot, of hope stitched into each day's work. You know the truth now. The Middle Ages are not the grand battles carved in stone, but the quiet survival pressed into every dawn and dusk, stranger than myths, harder than ballads, more human than any tale of knights could ever confess. The dawn seeps cold through the cracks in the walls, a pale grey light that presses softly against your eyelids, urging you to wake. The small room feels heavier in the morning, the damp settling like a second skin on the rough wood and packed earth beneath your feet. Outside, a thin mist curls around the village, draping the fields in a silvery veil that muffles the world's edges. You rise slowly, stretching muscles stiffened by the night's chill and the hardness of the straw beneath you. You gather your clothes from the peg, a rough linen shirt, patched woolen breeches, a faded cloak that smells faintly of smoke and earth. Each piece bears the marks of many seasons, torn hems mended with heavy stitches, patches faded unevenly from sun and rain. There is no silk here, no fine embroidery, only fabric made to endure, to shield you from the biting winds and biting insects alike. You dress with care, pulling each layer tight to keep warmth close to your skin, knowing the cold will cling to every breath you take outside. Stepping outside, you feel the crunch of frost underfoot, the brittle sounds sharp in the stillness before the village stirs. The air is crisp and carries the scent of damp earth, frozen fields, and smoke curling from a distant chimney. A few birds cry faintly overhead, their wings slicing through the quiet as they move from branch to branch, hunting for a morsel to keep the cold at bay. The village seems to hold its breath, caught between night and day, between the slow turning of seasons and the relentless work that defines your life here. You make your way toward the fields, the bundle of wood balanced once more on your shoulder, the familiar ache settling in your back and arms. There is little glamour in this walk, no grand procession, no heralds announcing your coming. Just the steady rhythm of footsteps on frozen mud, the whisper of your breath in the cold air, the soft crackle of twigs beneath your boots. The fields stretch out before you, flat and brown beneath the frost, the soil hard and unyielding but waiting. Here, the stories you hear in distant towns fall away. There are no knights jousting under bright banners, no grand tournaments to win glory or ransom. The greatest battles you know are against the soil, against hunger, against the chill that seeps into bones and will not leave until the sun burns high in the sky. The plough you lift each spring is your sword, the seed you scatter, your shield. Survival is a war waged quietly, day by day, against forces older and more stubborn than any enemy's sword. You see your neighbours beginning their day as well, a woman hauling water from the well, her breath clouding the air in front of her, a man leading a cart loaded with straw for the livestock, children rubbing sleep from their eyes, already pulling on patch boots too big for their small feet. Their faces are worn but steady, their hands rough with work, their eyes carrying the unspoken knowledge of this place and time. They do not speak of glory or conquest, they speak in practical terms, of frostbite, of poor yields, of mending fences before the thaw, of a calf born sick in the barn. As you work through the morning, your hands becoming familiar again with the feel of rough wood, cold earth, and worn leather, you understand the truth that the stories cannot hold. The Middle Ages are not the spectacle of shining armour and endless battles, nor the stark division of lords and peasants, but a world lived in shadows and light, in quiet endurance, in the simple and often harsh reality of daily life. Here, in this small village, life is stranger and harder than any myth, shaped by weather and soil, by community and solitude, by hope held fragile as the first green shoots of spring. The sun climbs slowly, its pale light filtering through the mist that still clings stubbornly to the fields beyond the village. You pause in your work, wiping a smear of cold earth from your palm, and look out over the patchwork of furrows, the frozen soil cracked in places like old leather. It is the kind of morning that feels suspended, neither quite night nor fully day, where the world holds its breath between the dark and the light. The silence is thick, broken only by the distant call of crows settling on skeletal trees and the occasional clatter of a loose shutter rattling against its frame. This moment, quiet and still, holds a weight that the stories often miss. When you imagine the Middle Ages, you think first of battles, feasts and lords in glittering halls, but here, where you stand, the truth is different. It is a life measured by hours spent in the soil, by the slow progress of planting and harvesting, by the small victories of a fence repaired before the sheep wander into the neighbour's field, or a roof patched before the rain leaks through again. The grand drama of history seems far away, replaced by the steady rhythm of labour and the delicate balance of survival. You turn back to the task at hand, stacking the last of the wood near the doorway, careful not to block the narrow path. Each piece is a reminder of winter's reach, a small hope for warmth in the evenings when the hearth fire sputters low. The woodpile will not last long, but for now it offers a small comfort against the dark and cold. You think of the stories you heard as a child, knights clad in shining armour, kings ruling vast lands, battles fought with clashing swords and thunderous war cries. They feel distant now, like fairy tales told to pass the long nights. The reality here is quieter, often harsher, and yet no less real. Nearby, the village church rises modestly against the pale sky. A simple stone building with a wooden door worn smooth by generations of hands. It is no grand cathedral, but a place where people gather not just for prayer, but for community, for rites marking births and deaths, for a fleeting sense of order in a world that often feels chaotic. The priest is a figure both respected and wary, a man who carries not just scripture, but the weight of counsel and the occasional harsh judgment. His sermons speak of salvation and sin, but also of charity and the bonds that hold the village together. Outside the walls, the land stretches into wildness, thickets, woods, and hills where dangers lurk and the law of the strong often prevails. You watch a woman approaching from the lane, her arms full of bundles, probably herbs or firewood, her face lined with the fatigue of years spent bending to the demands of this life. There is no glamour here, no promise of escape to castles or courts. Just the slow passing of days marked by the turning seasons, by births and deaths, by the work that must be done for another day to come. She nods briefly in greeting, and you return the gesture, understanding in that simple exchange the shared weight of endurance. The village holds its secrets in the quiet, the whispered stories of those lost to disease or famine, the grudges buried beneath the surface like stones, the small kindnesses that keep hearts warm in cold times. The world beyond may speak of crusades and conquests, but here life moves in a different tempo, slower, heavier, marked by the cycles of nature and the fragile human ties that bind one to another. As the morning sun finally breaks through the mist, spilling gold across the fields, you feel the steady pulse of this place, the strange, hard, beautiful truth of a world that is not the Middle Ages of legend, but the real Middle Ages of cold hands, weary backs, and quiet hope pressed deep into the soil. The warmth of the growing sun begins to ease the sharp bite of the morning frost, but the air still carries a chill that clings stubbornly to your breath as it escapes in soft clouds. You walk toward the village well, the worn stones damp beneath your boots, slick with the last of the morning's thaw. A few villagers have gathered, their faces shadowed and thoughtful in the pale light, waiting their turn to draw water. The well is a lifeline, simple but essential, its depth a measure of the village's fortune, its cool water a quiet reassurance amid the uncertainty of the days. As you lower the bucket, the rope rough against your fingers, you think of how the stories often forget this moment. The Middle Ages are painted with grand strokes, tournaments, castles, knights, but here it is the slow, steady necessity of water drawn by hand, bread kneaded by tired hands, a fire coaxed from wet wood that tells the true story. The well is a place where gossip mingles with the chill morning air, where news travels faster than the distant rider, where the village's pulse is measured in small shared moments. Behind you, children begin to stir, their voices rising like birdsong, sharp, curious, unguarded. They chase each other between the cottages, their laughter a fragile lightness in a world often heavy with hardship. Their clothes are patched and faded, their feet more often bare than shod, but their eyes hold a stubborn spark. They do not yet know the full weight of the seasons, of sickness and loss, of the quiet grind that shapes the lives of those around them. But they will learn, as all must, how to find moments of joy amidst the struggle, how to carve out play and laughter in a world that offers little. You watch a pair of women at the edge of the well, speaking in low tones as they wash cloth in the cold water, their hands red and raw. The work is endless. Clothes must be cleaned, food prepared, children cared for, all while keeping one eye on the needs of the household and the demands of the land. The idea of a medieval woman only as a meek servant or a noble lady draped in finery is far from the truth here. These hands you see are strong, capable, and often weary beyond their years. The village smithy sends out a steady rhythm, the ring of hammer on anvil echoing faintly across the fields. The smith is a figure of quiet importance, crafting the tools and repairs that hold this fragile world together, a ploughshare mended, a horseshoe forged, a simple knife sharpened. His forge is both a source of heat and light, a heart in the village that beats steadily, defying the cold and dark. The sparks that fly from his anvil are the closest thing to fireflies you see on these long winter evenings, brief and fleeting glimmers of warmth in the gloom. Nearby the fields lie bare and quiet, the land resting but never idle. You remember the seed catalogues carried by travelling merchants, simple bundles of beans, peas, barley and rye. These seeds hold the future in their tiny shells, the promise of sustenance that depends not just on nature's favour, but on human care and toil. The cycles of planting and harvest are harsh and unforgiving, and yet each spring carries the fragile hope that the soil will yield again. Life here is a tapestry woven of many threads: work and worry, faith and fear, community and solitude. The grand battles of kings and nobles often feel like distant echoes, barely touching the muddy lane where you walk, the thatched roof under which you shelter, the hearth where the fire flickers low. But the real stories, those of quiet endurance and stubborn hope, are written in the small details of daily life. As the sun climbs higher, the village slowly comes to life, and you find yourself caught in the rhythm once again. The endless work, the careful balance between hardship and survival, the strange and often overlooked reality of a medieval world that is far stranger and harder than any legend or myth could ever capture. The midday sun has climbed higher, though its warmth barely penetrates the chill still lingering in the air. You pause for a moment at the edge of the village green, watching smoke rise in lazy spirals from chimneys, thin and grey against the pale sky. The scent of burning wood mingles with the damp earth and the faint sharpness of herbs drying on wooden racks. Around you, the village hums quietly with its steady, unhurried rhythm, a rhythm born not of spectacle or grandeur, but of the simple, relentless demands of daily life. You see a group of men gathered near the blacksmith's forge, their faces marked by soot and sun, hands scarred from labour rather than battle. They speak in low tones about the upcoming season, when to sow, when to reap, and how best to protect the crops from the ever-looming threat of famine. Their knowledge is practical, born from years of experience and necessity rather than textbooks or tomes. Theirs is a wisdom hard-earned and shared in the flickering firelight of long evenings, not in the halls of kings or the pages of chronicles. The image of the knight in gleaming armour rides through your mind, but it feels distant, almost foreign here. Such armour was rare, reserved for a few, and most of the time it was heavy, cumbersome, and far from shiny, dulled by mud and sweat. The warriors of the village were more often farmers or tradesmen, pressed into service with crude weapons, their real battles fought with ploughs and axes rather than swords. The romanticised clashes of steel and shield pale in comparison to the quiet, grinding effort required to keep food on the table and shelter above your head. You notice an elderly woman sitting outside her cottage, carefully weaving a basket from willow branches. Her hands move with deliberate, practised patience, weaving strands together with a rhythm that feels almost like breathing. In her eyes, there is a softness, but also a steeliness shaped by decades of weathering hardship, harvest failures, harsh winters, loss and survival. She represents a different kind of strength, one not forged in battle, but in the slow, steady endurance of life itself. The children nearby play at their feet, weaving between their legs with laughter that cuts through the cold. Their games are simple, often improvised with sticks or stones, but in their joy lies a resilience that belies the hardships they will face. They learn early that life here is a balancing act between work and play, hope and hardship, fear and faith. Their innocence is a brief reprieve, a fragile light against the long shadow of responsibility that will soon follow. As you move back toward your home, you pass the village well again, this time busier with women washing clothes, exchanging news, and offering quiet counsel to one another. The community feels woven tightly, a network of shared burdens and small kindnesses that sustains them all. There is no great court or elaborate feast here, only the hum of voices, the scrape of hands against fabric, the occasional burst of laughter, and the steady drip of water returning to the earth. Even the land itself seems to carry stories untold. The furrows in the fields, the gnarled roots beneath the soil, the trees that whisper secrets in the wind. The Middle Ages are often imagined as a time locked in the past, distant and unchanging, but here the world is alive and shifting, marked by cycles and change, by growth and decay, by the fragile hope that life will continue despite all odds. And in this quiet truth lies the real story, not the bright shining armour or the sweeping battles of legend, but the slow, strange and difficult reality of people bound to their land, to their community, and to the unyielding passage of time. As the afternoon wanes, the light softens into a muted gold that spills gently over the village rooftops, casting long shadows that stretch across the frozen fields. You find yourself lingering near the edge of the village, where the cottages give way to the untamed wild, brambles, tangled woods, and the dark line of hills beyond. The The boundary between the known and the unknown feels thin here, a place where the familiar rhythms of village life meet the unpredictable moods of nature. The wind moves softly through the bare branches, carrying whispers of distant places and forgotten tales, as if the forest itself holds secrets from another time. You breathe in the cold air tinged with the scent of pine and damp earth, and let your thoughts drift to the stories told around hearths and in the village church. Tales of spirits and saints, of miracles and misfortunes, of the everyday mysteries that filled a medieval world where science and superstition intertwined. It is a world unlike our own, where the unseen shapes much of what is seen, where faith walks hand in hand with fear, and where the boundaries between reality and legend blur in the flickering firelight. Here, there is no place for the polished, idealized image of the Middle Ages that fills books and films. No shining knights ride here on gleaming steeds. Instead, men and women bear the marks of their labour. Calloused hands, tired eyes, and clothes patched and faded by time. The simple act of walking these paths, of tending these fields and animals, is itself a testament to endurance far beyond any battlefield glory. You think of the seasons, how they dictate the rhythm of life with unyielding precision. Spring brings the promise of planting and growth, summer the frantic care of crops and livestock, autumn the long hours of harvest and preparation, and winter the slow, often harsh test of survival against cold and scarcity. Each season shapes the tasks, the worries, the very way of being in this world. And through it all, the village moves slowly, a community bound together by necessity and shared fate, by small joys and small losses woven into the fabric of everyday existence. The forest beyond seems to watch silently, a guardian and a threat in equal measure. It provides wood for fires, herbs for healing, game for food, but it also harbours dangers, from wild animals to bandits, and the ever-present fear of illness. You know well that life here requires constant vigilance, not just against enemies with swords, but against the less visible foes of hunger, cold, and disease. As dusk falls, the village will gather once more near hearths, sharing warmth, food, and stories. These moments hold a different kind of power, quiet, enduring, and deeply human. The myths of battles and chivalry may fade into the shadows outside, but here, in the heart of the village, life persists with a strange, unyielding grace, shaped by the hardships and hopes of countless generations. This is the Middle Ages that few see, the slow, difficult, and often lonely reality beneath the legend. As twilight deepens, the village settles into a hush, broken only by the soft crackle of fires flickering behind cottage windows and the distant lowing of cattle returning to their stalls. You walk slowly along the narrow lane, feeling the chill deepen as the sun dips below the horizon, leaving the sky awash of muted purples and blues. The air is sharp now, carrying the scent of smoke and damp earth, mingled with the faint sweet aroma of burning pine needles. This quiet hour feels suspended between day and night, a fragile moment of stillness before darkness fully descends. Your footsteps echo softly on the cobblestones, worn smooth by years of passage, each stone holding the faint imprint of countless feet. Farmers, children, travellers, all part of the village's long and tangled story. The houses are darkening one by one, their occupants drawn close to hearths and the warmth of family. Outside, the wind stirs the thatch roofs and rattles a loose shutter, a reminder of the constant battle against the elements that shapes every aspect of life here. You pause before a simple wooden door, etched with the marks of hands that built it long ago. Inside, a family gathers around a small fire, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on rough walls. Their voices are low and steady, conversations about the day's work, plans for tomorrow, the health of children and livestock. Theirs is a world far from the courts and castles of legend, filled instead with the intimate concerns of survival and kinship. In this moment, the grand myths of the Middle Ages feel like echoes from another world. The knights and nobles you imagined seem distant and unreal compared to the real people here. Those who endure hunger and sickness, who labour from dawn to dusk, who find joy in small moments of rest and companionship. The armour is heavy and rare. The battles are usually fought with tools and wills rather than swords and shields. Life's true battles are fought in fields, kitchens and homes, often unnoticed and unrecorded. You think of the stories passed down in hushed tones, of famine that took whole families, of plagues that swept through villages, of sudden storms that could destroy a year's work in an hour. Yet you also think of resilience, the way the village rebuilds after each hardship, how the community holds together despite loss and fear. It is a strange kind of strength, not the glory sung by bards, but the quiet courage to face each new day with hope and grit. The night deepens, and stars begin to prick the darkening sky, faint and distant. You know the night will bring cold, perhaps pain, and rest for some but restless hours for others. The world beyond your village may be filled with tales of conquest and heroism, but here life is lived in shadows and flickers, in the soft glow of firelight, in the whispered prayers, in the unspoken bonds that tie you all together. This is the real Middle Ages, not the shiny, heroic dream, but the strange, hard, and deeply human reality that shaped countless lives in ways no legend can fully capture. The village breathes softly in the night, wrapped in a blanket of silence, broken only by the occasional creak of timber settling, or the distant howl of a lone wolf echoing through the dark woods beyond. You stand just outside your door, the cold air biting gently at your cheeks, and look up at the sky scattered with faint stars, their light faint but steady, like distant beacons in the vast unknown. The moon is a thin crescent, barely shedding light but enough to outline the familiar shapes of rooftops and trees, cloaking everything in a muted silver haze. Here, in the quiet, the myths of the medieval world fade further away, replaced by the tangible stillness that fills the night. The constant struggle of life in this time is not just by day's labour, but by the long hours when darkness rules, and the mind wanders through fears and hopes alike. The night is a time of vulnerability, when the cold seeps through walls, when illness creeps silently, and when the unknown feels closest. Yet it is also a time of reflection, of whispered prayers and quiet dreams, a fragile space where life's many burdens are momentarily softened by the calm. You recall the stories of medieval nights told in distant towns, of castles lit by torchlight, of grand feasts and revelry, of troubadours singing beneath noble windows. But here, the truth is simpler, often harsher. The village sleeps beneath heavy thatch roofs, its people wrapped in worn blankets, their breaths shallow and steady. Fires burn low, not to illuminate grand halls, but to chase away the chill and the dark that threatens the fragile peace. The sounds you hear are the creaks of the village settling, the soft rustle of animals in their stalls, the occasional cough or murmur from within the cottages. You move back inside, the wooden door closing with a soft thud behind you. The small hearth flickers, casting a warm, uneven glow on the rough walls. The heat seeps slowly into your bones, a small comfort against the long, cold night. You settle beside the fire, feeling the fatigue of the day weigh heavily but quietly. The stories of knights and battles, of glorious deeds and shining armour, seem like distant echoes compared to the reality that surrounds you. A reality shaped by endurance, by the bonds between neighbours and family, by the daily acts of care and survival. The night stretches ahead, deep and unyielding, yet within its darkness lies a strange kind of peace. Here, the true heart of the Middle Ages beats, hidden not in grand tales, but in the silent courage of those who face each day anew, who carry their burdens quietly, who find warmth in the company of others despite the cold. The stories may tell of glory and conquest, but this is the world lived, the world endured, the world real. Morning arrives quietly, the sky a pale wash of grey as dawn stretches its fingers over the horizon. The village stirs gently, the familiar sounds of waking life soft and slow, the creak of shutters being opened, the clatter of wooden buckets, the low murmur of voices exchanging greetings. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and smoke from the hearth still burning within the cottages. You step outside, feeling the coolness settle over your skin, and watch as the first faint light touches the frost-covered fields, turning the brittle grass into shimmering glass. Today, like so many days before it, begins with small tasks, gathering firewood, tending to the animals, preparing simple meals from what the earth has reluctantly yielded. The reality of medieval life is not the swift clash of swords or the drama of court intrigue, but the slow, persistent routine that shapes every moment. Each action is heavy with meaning because survival depends on it. The plough must break the frozen soil, the sheep must be sheltered from the cold, the children must be fed and clothed despite scant resources. You notice the village children moving among the adults, their laughter light but edged with the early awareness of hardship. Their clothes are patched, their faces smudged with the dust and grime of constant play and work, but their spirits remain surprisingly resilient. They chase each other with makeshift toys, sticks carved into swords, stones tossed like coins, finding moments of joy even when the world around them offers so little. It is a fragile innocence, one that the village tries to protect, but one that time will inevitably erode. You pause near the edge of the common land, where the village well stands as a silent witness to generations of lives. Women draw water with practiced ease, their conversations weaving stories of neighbours, illnesses, and the changing seasons. The well is more than just a source of water. It is a gathering place, a hub of community, a space where the threads of daily life intertwine. Here, you glimpse the real social fabric of the Middle Ages, a web of interdependence, shared burdens, and mutual support. The image of knights in shining armour feels more distant than ever, replaced by this tangible, grounded world. The armour was heavy and rare, the battles mostly sporadic and often far from this village. Instead, the villagers fight daily battles of their own, with hunger, with weather, with disease. Theirs is a struggle of endurance rather than conquest, of small victories rather than grand triumphs. And yet, amidst the hardship, there is a quiet dignity here. The land, though stubborn, sustains them. The community, though small and worn, holds them. Their lives, though far from the legends, are rich with the complexity of real human experience. Hope, fear, love, and loss woven tightly together like the threads in a worn tapestry. As the day unfolds, you become part of this rhythm, moving with the steady pulse of a world that is far stranger and harder than any storybook could convey. The afternoon sun leans low, casting a warm amber glow across the village, softening the rough edges of stone and wood. Shadows lengthen lazily over the thatched roofs, pooling in the narrow alleys and dipping into the hollow spaces between cottages. The air holds a faint sweetness now, a mixture of drying hay, wood smoke, and the faint tang of earth warmed by the sun. You walk slowly, allowing your senses to drink in these quiet details that the stories of heroes and battles so often overlook. Around you, life moves with a deliberate, measured pace. Near the edge of the village, a small group of men bend over the earth, digging trenches for drainage, their hands rough and worn but steady in their work. There is no glory in this task, no applause or praise, only the slow, necessary toil that keeps the village from drowning in the rains of spring. You watch how they exchange words in low tones, their voices blending with the occasional clink of tools and the soft rustling of wind through the bare branches. Nearby, a woman tends a small garden patch, pulling weeds with careful fingers and examining the stubborn shoots of early greens pushing through the soil. Her face is lined with years of sun and hardship, but her eyes reflect a quiet hope, a belief that this land will yet provide. It is this hope, fragile but persistent, that threads through the daily lives of everyone here. It is the invisible force that keeps hands working and hearts steady. You think again of the image so often painted in tales, a world of endless warfare and harsh brutality. But the truth you see is more complex, more human. Yes, conflict existed, but it was sporadic and often localized, rarely the grand, sweeping battles of legend. Most lives were shaped not by the clash of swords, but by the relentless struggle against hunger, disease, and the harshness of nature. War was a distant shadow. Survival was the immediate and constant reality. The village children have gathered by the fire pit, their games quieter now, more subdued as the day wanes. They listen to an elder recounting stories, some true, some embroidered with the thread of myth. These stories serve many purposes: entertainment, warning, education. They bind the community, offering a shared language of memory and meaning. But beneath the tales lie the real experiences, the lived moments of loss, joy, and endurance that shape every generation. You notice the animals, cows lowing softly in their stalls, chickens clucking and scratching at the earth, a dog lying curled near a hearth. Their presence is a steady comfort, a reminder of the fragile balance between human and nature. The animals are both livelihood and companions, integral to this delicate ecosystem of survival. As the light fades, you feel the weight of this world, the strange, hard beauty of a life forged in quiet resilience. It is not the world of legends or fantasy, but one rooted deeply in the soil and sweat of those who came before, whose stories rarely reach the pages of history yet remain etched in every stone and breath. The evening grows cooler now, a gentle breeze stirring the last golden leaves that cling to the gnarled branches overhead. The village nestles into its quiet routine, lights beginning to flicker in the windows as families gather around hearths to share warmth and simple meals. You linger near the communal baking oven, watching as the bakers slide flat loaves onto the stone surface, the faint scent of baking bread curling through the crisp air. This aroma, humble yet rich, fills the village with a sense of comfort and sustenance, a reminder of the daily acts that sustain life here. You observe the bakers' worn hands, steady despite the fatigue etched in their faces, moving with practiced ease born from repetition and necessity. Bread was often the staple, made from coarse grains that left it dense and rough, far from the delicate pastries of the nobility. Yet for the village, this bread was a vital link to survival, shared among families and neighbours alike, a small blessing amid the uncertainties of each day. Nearby, a mother cradles her infant, singing a soft lullaby in a tongue that sounds both foreign and familiar, its melody winding gently through the night air. Her voice, though quiet, carries the weight of generations, a thread connecting past and future, hope and memory. The child stirs in her arms, eyes fluttering closed as the gentle song wraps around them both. This moment, simple, fragile, yet profound, reflects the essence of medieval life far from the grand tales of kings and crusades. The real stories are those of families, of survival and love amid hardship, of ordinary people forging lives from the raw materials of earth and time. The harshness is undeniable, the cold, the hunger, the ever-present threat of sickness, but so too is the resilience, the small joys, the quiet acts of care that make existence possible. You think of the village healer, a woman who moves silently between cottages, her knowledge a blend of herbs, prayer, and long observation. She's both respected and feared, a figure embodying the blurred line between science and superstition that defined much of the medieval understanding of health. Her remedies are never certain, her powers limited, but her presence is a vital thread in the community's fabric. As darkness deepens, the stars emerge again, faint and cold, scattered across the vast sky. The village breathes beneath them, a cluster of flickering lights in the endless night, a testament to human endurance. There are no shining armours here, no heroic battles, only the steady, strange reality of lives shaped by forces far greater than themselves. And in this steady rhythm, you find the heart of the Middle Ages, not the myths of glory, but the quiet, persistent struggle of life itself. Night deepens, and the village rests under a heavy blanket of stars, their pale light faintly illuminating the contours of rooftops and winding paths. You find yourself drawn toward the small chapel at the village centre, its worn stone walls bathed in the cool glow of moonlight. The chapel stands quiet and unassuming, far from the grandeur of cathedrals in distant cities, but it holds a deep significance here. It is a place of refuge, a space where the villagers' hopes, fears, and prayers converge in whispered murmurs and bowed heads. Inside, the wooden benches creak softly under the weight of the few who remain, their faces shadowed and solemn. The flicker of candlelight casts gentle, trembling shapes against the rough-hewn walls, where faded frescoes tell stories of saints and miracles long past. For many, faith is a lifeline in a world marked by uncertainty, an anchor amid the unpredictable cycles of nature, illness, and conflict. It offers comfort, community, and a language for the mysteries they cannot understand. You settle in the back, feeling the cool stone beneath your fingertips, listening to the low murmur of prayers that rise and fall like a quiet tide. The voices blend with the distant sounds of night, the rustle of trees, the soft snort of a horse in its stall, the occasional bark of a dog. Outside, the wind carries the faint scent of incense and burning wood, mingling with the earthiness of the village. This chapel is not a place of spectacle or power, but one of intimate connection, a reminder that amidst hardship people sought meaning and solace in shared belief. The faith practiced here is woven into the fabric of daily life, influencing decisions, relationships, and hopes. It is neither rigid nor grandiose, but lived and breathed in the small rituals that mark births, marriages, deaths, and the turning of seasons. You think of how this spiritual life contrasts with the popular image of the Middle Ages as a time dominated by knights and battles. In truth, for most, the church was less a stage for grand events, and more a constant presence, a quiet companion in their daily struggles. It shaped not only their worldviews, but also their sense of community, identity, and purpose. As the prayers come to a gentle close, you rise quietly, stepping back into the night. The village sleeps once more, wrapped in shadows and dreams, holding stories that the world beyond seldom hears. Here, life is lived in the balance between hardship and hope, between the seen and unseen, between endurance and faith. And so, the real Middle Ages continue, strange, hard, and quietly profound in their ordinary truths. Stepping back into the cool night air, you feel the stillness of the village settle around you like a soft cloak. The path beneath your feet is uneven, worn smooth over centuries by countless footsteps. Farmers returning from fields, children running to their homes, traders passing through. Each stone and worn patch of earth holds the memory of lives lived quietly but fully, far from the grand stages of history. The darkness deepens, wrapping the village in a serene yet fragile calm, as if the world itself is holding its breath between one moment and the next. Your thoughts drift to the daily rhythms that govern this life, the turning of seasons, the rise and fall of the sun, the cycles of planting and harvest. These rhythms are relentless, indifferent to human hopes or fears. The Middle Ages were not a time of endless battle or chivalric splendour, but of ceaseless labour and survival. You imagine the fields in the early morning mist, the soft crunch of frost underfoot as villagers set out to tend their crops or care for animals. Their lives are measured in hours and tasks, in small successes and setbacks that ripple through the community like invisible threads. You pass by a small cluster of homes where a fire flickers faintly through a window, smoke curling into the night air. Inside, a family sits together, the children's faces glowing softly in the firelight. The parents' hands are calloused, their eyes lined with fatigue, yet there is a gentle tenderness in their movements, a quiet care that sustains these simple lives. Here, survival depends not only on strength, but on patience, adaptability, and the deep bonds that tie neighbours and kin together. The world beyond this village may imagine the Middle Ages as a dark and brutal era, but the reality is far more nuanced. There were hardships, certainly, disease, poverty, the ever-present threat of hunger, but there were also moments of joy, of community, of human connection that transcend time. The strange mixture of hope and fear, of endurance and fragility, defines this era more truly than any sword or shield. You pause beside a well, its stones cool and rough beneath your hands. This well has quenched thirst for generations, a silent witness to countless stories of birth, death, and daily life. Water here is precious, a lifeline in a world where every resource must be carefully tended. The villagers understand this intimately, their lives intertwined with the land and its gifts in ways that are difficult to fully grasp from the safety of modern distance. As you continue your slow walk back through the village, the faint sounds of night animals emerge, a hoot of an owl, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. These sounds remind you that this world is alive in every sense, a complex tapestry of life and death, of struggle and survival. The Middle Ages were strange, hard, and far removed from the romantic images painted in stories. Yet they were also deeply human, marked by resilience, connection, and the quiet determination to endure whatever came next. The chill of the night lingers as you move toward the outskirts of the village, where the fields open up beneath a vast, dark sky. The land stretches wide and empty, a patchwork of furrows and meadows still resting from the labours of the day. You feel the cool breeze tug at your cloak, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and wild herbs. In this quiet expanse, the village feels small and fragile, a fragile human mark upon a vast untamed world. Here, the reality of medieval life reveals itself with greater clarity. The land was both a provider and a threat, a source of food and livelihood, but also a reminder of nature's unpredictable power. Storms could ruin crops, droughts could parch the soil, and harsh winters could leave the village exposed and vulnerable. This constant tension between hope and fear shaped every decision, every gesture, every conversation. You notice the faint outline of a solitary tree near the edge of a field, its branches bare and skeletal against the night sky. It stands as a silent sentinel, witness to countless seasons, storms and stories. In many ways, it mirrors the lives of those who lived here, resilient yet marked by hardship, enduring through the cycles of growth and decay. As you stand in the cool darkness, you think of the medieval calendar, which structured life more rigidly than the modern one. Every day was tied to a saint's feast, a holy day, or a seasonal marker. These moments provided not only a rhythm but also a form of solace, brief pauses from labour where communities gathered, shared stories, and renewed their bonds. Yet even these celebrations were tempered by the harsh realities that awaited them once the festivities ended. You hear the distant howl of wolves, a chilling reminder of the wildness just beyond the fields. These creatures were both feared and respected, part of the complex relationship between humans and nature. Villagers understood that survival depended on careful vigilance and respect for the land's many dangers, both seen and unseen. The notion of constant warfare, of knights clashing in endless battles, feels distant and largely irrelevant here. Instead, the real conflicts were often between man and nature, between scarcity and plenty, between hope and despair. This was a world where everyday survival was a quiet victory, where endurance mattered more than glory. As you turn back toward the village, the first faint light of dawn begins to touch the horizon. The night's chill slowly fades, replaced by the promise of a new day, uncertain but filled with the same strange blend of hardship and hope. This is the true essence of the Middle Ages, not the stories told by poets or painted by artists, but the lived reality of those who toiled in shadow, whose lives were shaped by forces far beyond their control, yet who continued to dream and endure. Dawn unfolds gently, the pale light creeping over the horizon, casting soft hues of pink and gold across the fields and rooftops. The village awakens slowly, each moment measured and deliberate, like the turning of a great invisible wheel. You find yourself drawn again to the humble hearths, where smoke curls upward in thin tendrils, mingling with the crisp morning air. The scent of damp wood and baking bread weaves through the village, a quiet comfort in a world so often marked by uncertainty. The villagers begin their day with familiar rituals, fetching water from the well, tending to the animals, preparing simple meals with whatever the land has yielded. These acts, repeated countless times, are the fabric of medieval life, more essential and enduring than the tales of battles or courtly intrigue. You watch a woman skillfully spin wool, her hands moving with practiced grace, transforming raw fleece into thread that will become cloth to protect her family from the cold. This work, humble and unseen by history's grand stage, is vital. Each thread a link in the chain of survival. The village children, now fully awake, help where they can, learning the rhythms of work and rest, of hope and hardship. Their laughter, though light, carries an undertone of seriousness beyond their years, a reflection of the world they inherit. They are taught early that life is not a tale of endless adventure, but a series of tasks and responsibilities, small victories and losses. Yet in their eyes, you see the same spark of curiosity and resilience that has carried humanity through the ages. You wander toward the village marketplace, where a handful of vendors display their goods, grains, dried herbs, pottery, and worn tools. Trade here is modest and personal, conducted not in great halls but in open-air spaces where neighbours meet and exchange what little they have. The economy is local and limited, shaped by the seasons and the land's generosity or scarcity. Barter often replaces coin, and relationships matter as much as goods. You sense a quiet interdependence, a network of mutual reliance woven through everyday life. As the sun rises higher, warming the earth, you consider the stark contrast between this reality and the grand images of medieval wealth and power. While kings and nobles possessed lands and armies, the majority lived in conditions marked by hard labour, modest means, and persistent uncertainty. Their lives were shaped less by conquest than by endurance, less by glory than by the slow work of keeping families fed and sheltered. Yet there is a beauty here, in the slow turning of days, in the small acts of care, in the quiet strength of a community bound not by blood or title but by shared experience. This is the true Middle Ages, a world stranger and more complex than legend allows, a world that challenges our expectations and invites us to see beyond the armour and castles. The afternoon sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows that stretch across the village square like gentle fingers brushing the earth. The air carries a soft warmth, tempered by a slight breeze that rustles the leaves of the few scattered trees nearby. Life in the village continues its unhurried rhythm, every movement deliberate, each task blending into the next without hurry or spectacle. You find yourself wandering toward the edge of the village, where the communal workshop hums with quiet activity. Here, a few craftsmen, blacksmiths, carpenters and cobblers, work in modest huts, their hands shaping metal, wood and leather with steady precision. The clang of hammer on anvil rings out in irregular pulses, a sound both familiar and reassuring. This work, essential yet often overlooked, supports the entire village. From repairing tools to crafting shoes, these artisans keep the daily life possible. Watching the blacksmith, you realise how distant the notion of gleaming armour and ornate weaponry is from this place. Most armour was prohibitively expensive and heavy, used only in battle or ceremonial occasions, not the everyday attire of knights marching through the fields. The blacksmith's real work lies in practical repairs, shoeing horses, fixing ploughs, mending nails. His craft is one of quiet necessity rather than grand spectacle. Nearby, the carpenter shapes a rough plank of wood, his hands steady despite the splinters and sawdust that coat them. The chair he builds is sturdy, designed to last rather than impress. His tools are simple but effective, worn smooth from years of use. The carpenter's work provides comfort and utility, a tangible link between nature's raw materials and human needs. You notice how these artisans are woven deeply into the village's social fabric. They are neither noble nor poor, occupying a vital middle ground. Their skills command respect, and their livelihoods depend on the goodwill and needs of their neighbours. Their lives reflect the interconnectedness that defined medieval communities, a network of roles, trades and relationships that sustained everyone. The stories of knights and battles often eclipse these quieter realities, but here, in the workshop's fading light, the real pulse of medieval life beats strong and steady. It is a world built not on legend but on labour, resilience and the slow craft of survival. As the sun dips lower, casting a final glow over the village, you sense how far this reality lies from the romanticised images, yet how deeply human and enduring it remains. The sky deepens into hues of violet and blue as twilight settles softly over the village, wrapping the fields and rooftops in a gentle dimness. A few lamps begin to glow in windows, their flickering light casting shadows that dance quietly on the walls. The village exhales after the long day of labour, shifting into a slower, quieter rhythm, where small moments of rest offer brief respite from the relentless demands of survival. You find yourself drawn toward the village well once more, where a small group has gathered. They speak in low voices, sharing news and stories, some true, some exaggerated, a tradition as old as the village itself. Their conversation weaves through tales of the harvest, the weather, births, and the latest rumours from the nearby market town. This communal sharing is vital. In a world where written records are scarce and news travels slowly, oral storytelling shapes understanding and keeps the community connected. The well itself, ancient and worn, is more than a source of water. It is a symbol of life, a gathering point where the boundaries between private and public blur. Here, you witness the strength of human connection, a reminder that even in harsh times, companionship and communication sustain the spirit. You notice the mixture of weariness and resilience in their faces. Their lives are marked by hardship, but also by a deep bond that offers comfort and meaning. They laugh softly at shared jokes, nod knowingly at concerns, and offer advice drawn from experience. This network of relationships is as crucial as the crops and livestock that sustain them. Far from the battlefield, Far from the grand castles and political intrigue, this is the heart of medieval life, a life often overlooked, yet fundamental. It is here that the real Middle Ages unfold, in whispered conversations, shared meals, and the simple acts of kindness and survival. As night deepens, the voices grow quieter, the village settling once again into darkness and dreams. The cycle of hardship and hope continues, a slow, steady pulse that defines the strange, difficult, and deeply human world of the Middle Ages. The night deepens around the village, draping the landscape in velvety darkness, broken only by the faint flicker of distant stars and the soft glow of hearth fires behind window panes. The village is mostly silent now, save for the occasional creak of timber settling and the faint murmur of a breeze passing through empty streets. You walk slowly along the narrow lanes, your footsteps muffled by dirt and straw, absorbing the solitude that cloaks the world in calm after a day filled with toil. Your path leads you to the edge of the village where the small cemetery lies, a modest plot of earth marked by simple wooden crosses and rough-hewn stones. Here rest the souls of those who lived and died within this fragile community, their names and stories largely forgotten beyond these borders. There are no grand monuments or tales of heroism. Instead, the graves speak quietly of ordinary lives ended too soon, of families touched by loss and sorrow. You feel the weight of time pressing softly upon this place. The Middle Ages were not only defined by labour and survival, but also by the ever-present shadow of death. Disease, famine, and injury were constant threats, and life expectancy was low. Yet amid this fragility, people found ways to mourn, to remember, and to carry on. Rituals surrounding death, burials, prayers, and commemorations offered moments of reflection and connection, linking the living with those who had gone before. You imagine the grief of a mother who has lost a child, the quiet strength of a husband burying his wife, the collective hope for mercy and peace beyond the struggles of this world. These moments, deeply human and timeless, reveal another facet of medieval life often obscured by tales of glory and conquest. The simplicity of the graves contrasts starkly with the vivid images of knights and kings. Here lies the truth of the era, a time when life was often short and harsh, but also filled with profound acts of love, remembrance, and resilience. The village's history is written not in chronicles of battles, but in the silent testimonies of those who endured its hardships. You turn away slowly, carrying with you the solemn beauty of this place, a reminder that beneath the myths, the Middle Ages were a deeply human story, woven from countless small lives, joys, and sorrows. As the deep night settles fully over the village, you remain outside the cluster of homes drawn to the delicate boundary where darkness meets faint warm light. The air is cool now, tinged with the scent of damp earth and smoke from distant chimneys. You take a slow, deliberate breath, feeling the stillness settle around you like a heavy cloak, and imagine yourself stepping quietly into the world of the medieval common folk. Not the tales of knights in shining armour, but the slow, often unforgiving rhythms of daily survival. In this time, the concept of cleanliness differs sharply from modern expectations. You recall that bathing was infrequent, partly because water was precious, and partly because beliefs about health and cleanliness were intertwined with superstition and religious ideas. The common person might wash their hands and face regularly, but whole-body baths were rare, and sometimes considered unhealthy or even dangerous. Instead, the use of perfumes, herbs, and powders helped mask odours, though the reality was far from the sanitized images of later centuries. This understanding shapes the social fabric in ways subtle and profound. Personal hygiene was as much about community perception and spiritual well-being as it was about physical health. You imagine walking down the narrow lanes between the timber-framed houses, their walls darkened by smoke and soot. The streets themselves are often muddy and strewn with waste, especially after rains. And yet this is not just neglect. There was simply no modern sanitation system. Instead, waste was removed manually or disposed of in fields or nearby rivers, creating a precarious balance between necessity and hazard. Diseases spread quickly in these conditions, and villagers lived with a constant undercurrent of fear, not just from wars or famine, but from the invisible threats of illness. In the homes, families gather around open hearths that serve as the heart of domestic life. The The flickering firelight illuminates faces worn by labour but softened by moments of tenderness. A mother stitching clothes, a father carving a wooden spoon, children listening intently to stories told by an elder. The hearth is where meals are prepared, where warmth is shared, and where life's daily concerns are whispered and weighed. Food is simple and repetitive. Porridge, coarse bread, and whatever vegetables the soil will yield, sometimes supplemented by preserved meats or fish. Rarity makes meat a precious treat, not an everyday fare, and the notion of banquets and feasts belongs largely to the nobility. Outside, the animals, chickens, pigs, goats, roam close to the homes, their presence a constant reminder of the precarious balance between domestication and wildness. Their roles are both practical and symbolic, integral to the village's economy and survival, but also woven into the spiritual and superstitious beliefs that coloured medieval understanding of the world. For instance, the presence of black cats or howling dogs might be seen as omens or connected to darker folklore, mixing everyday life with the mysterious. Life's hardships are many: unpredictable weather, poor harvests, outbreaks of illness, and the ceaseless demands of labour. Yet amid this struggle, you sense moments of quiet grace, the laughter of children chasing one another through muddy streets, the soft murmur of prayer before a meal, the small kindnesses exchanged between neighbours. These moments are the fragile threads that hold the village together, a counterpoint to the stark realities that define existence here. As you stand quietly, the distant church bell tolls the hour, a sound that marks not just time but the shared rhythms of a community bound by faith and tradition. You realise that while the Middle Ages are often painted as a time of darkness and brutality, the truth is far more complex and deeply human. It is a world where hardship and hope coexist, where resilience grows not from glory, but from the endurance of everyday lives. And in this enduring rhythm, strange and sometimes harsh though it is, you find the real heartbeat of the Middle Ages, the story of people who lived, loved, suffered, and persisted in ways both ordinary and extraordinary. The deep night wraps the village in an almost complete hush now, yet as you linger at the edge of its flickering circle of warmth, the threads of daily life remain visible if you watch closely enough. Somewhere beyond the thin wooden walls and shuttered windows, you sense families huddled near their hearths, their whispered prayers and low conversations drifting up like smoke to mingle with the star-pocked sky. In these quiet hours, the myth of a medieval world endlessly alive with courtly banquets and heroic battles fades, replaced instead by the far stranger, subtler reality of unbroken routine and fragile endurance. You turn down another narrow lane, feet sinking slightly into the muddy earth churned by countless boots and hooves. The air is heavy with a mix of scents: smoke, damp straw, manure, the lingering aroma of stewed barley or cabbage clinging to the night air. Even here, you feel how closely life and land are bound. A peasant's work does not end when the sun sets. Some nights, when the season demands, labour stretches deep into darkness, harvesting by moonlight when storms threaten the fields, tending to sick livestock, standing guard against roaming wolves or bandits who see only opportunity in the soft shadows between one dwelling and the next. Past a sagging fence you glimpse a communal garden, rows of hardy leeks, turnips, beans. In a time without supermarkets or steady trade routes, every scrap of earth must yield what it can. Crop failures could mean hunger for the whole community, so villagers often plant small plots close to home, watched and tended with care that borders on reverence. Herbs grow here too: sage, rosemary, thyme, prized not only for seasoning bland stews but for their faint promise of warding off sickness, when the healer's knowledge is little more than whispered superstition mixed with half-remembered lore. Near the garden stands a small timber shed where tools are stored: spades, rakes, sickles. You imagine the rough handles worn smooth by generations of hands, each splinter a quiet testament to labour unrecorded by any chronicler's pen. These simple tools hold more power over daily life than any knight's sword. They decide whether families eat or starve when the frost comes early, or the rain stays too long. You drift onward to a cottage where candlelight flickers through a gap in the shutters. Inside, a family sits gathered close. A father mends a broken bucket's hoop, squinting in the weak glow. A mother spins wool, the spindle turning in her careful hands, her thumbs smoothing the rough strands. At her feet, A child dozes against the wall, the weight of the day's chores pressing his eyelids closed. Another child hums softly to herself, plucking at a ragged doll stuffed with straw and scraps of old cloth. In this small, flickering scene, you see the simple heroism that films so often ignore. An entire household bound not by fealty to some lord's banner, but by necessity, love, and an unspoken promise to endure whatever tomorrow brings. Outside, the wind shifts and you catch a distant sound, the low rhythmic chant of monks drifting from the monastery a short walk beyond the village edge. Their voices rise and fall like a living thread woven through the dark countryside, reminding the villagers that somewhere prayers are offered on their behalf. For medieval folk, faith is not decoration but structure, a constant, intangible shelter against misfortune. A sudden fever or a withering crop can feel like punishment or a test, and only by kneeling before a crucifix or offering a coin to a passing pilgrim can one hope to tip the balance of mercy. In the monastery itself, life unfolds at a pace both foreign and familiar. Monks rise before dawn to chant in cold stone halls, copying texts by the flicker of oil lamps, tending gardens where herbs grow in neat rows for potions and poultices. They hold bits of ancient knowledge, medicinal recipes, half-remembered science, prayers in Latin, and in their quiet scriptoriums, the seeds of learning wait out the centuries until the wider world is ready to bloom again. You realise, as you stand in the hush between farm and monastery, how deeply the real Middle Ages slip between the shining plates of a knight's armour or the grandeur of courtly halls. The true strangeness is not found in battles and feasts, but in these hidden hours, in the soft hush of spinning wheels, the breath of cattle steaming in winter barns, the monk's chant echoing through corridors cold as stone. Here, survival is not guaranteed by sword or crown, but by quiet skill, stubborn hope, and the daily labour that binds earth to life. A sudden gust stirs the thatch roofs, a rooster somewhere coughs out a single sleepy crow, and the village drifts deeper into the silence of a world both harsh and tender, fragile yet enduring beyond what any legend dares to tell. The stars drift silently overhead, their cold light washing the dark countryside in a pale hush, as you follow the faint path away from the village toward the monastery, whose chants you heard moments ago. The air grows colder here at the fringe where cultivated land yields to open fields and patches of old forest. In the distance, the silhouette of the stone monastery rises against the sky. Sturdy walls, a simple tower, narrow windows flickering with dim candlelight. It stands as a quiet fortress of faith and learning, in a world where knowledge can be as fleeting as a breath of wind. You pass under a small wooden gate, its hinges squeaking in protest, and step onto the worn stones of the cloister walk. The hush here is deeper than in the village. Inside these walls, the monks move through lives shaped by ritual. Canonical hours marked by bells, prayers in Latin, labour in the gardens, ink and vellum in the scriptorium where they copy manuscripts with a patience that seems inhuman in its quiet persistence. It is strange to think that here, in this cold, narrow place, ideas that might vanish elsewhere are preserved one careful letter at a time. You slip through a narrow door into the scriptorium where a few monks sit hunched over parchment. Their quills scratch faintly, dipping into ink made from oak galls and iron salts. They copy psalms, sermons, old bits of Roman wisdom. Some pages are embellished with delicate illuminations, tiny vines of gold leaf, saints haloed in brilliant blue, but most are plain, the value lying not in beauty, but in the simple act of keeping words alive through winters and wars and forgetfulness. One monk pauses, flexes his cramped hand, mutters a prayer under his breath before continuing the slow, deliberate work. This is a world where knowledge is fragile, held in flickering minds and fragile pages that can be ruined by damp fire or a careless hand. Few villagers read, fewer still write. The spoken word, rumour and memory carries more weight than any page. And yet these monks, in their quiet dedication, keep alive seeds of thought that will one day root themselves in universities, libraries, the curious minds of future centuries. The modern myth of the Middle Ages as a time of pure ignorance ignores this small stubborn flame, flickering in hidden rooms like this one. You step out into the monastery's herb garden, enclosed by low stone walls that trap what little warmth the earth has left. Beds of sage, rosemary, lavender, fennel. each tended by the monks not only for flavouring the bland gruels that feed them, but for their promise of medicine. In a world without modern science, these herbs are knowledge distilled into root and leaf. Teas for fever, poultices for wounds, sprigs hung above doorways to ward off evil spirits, when faith and folk belief blend together with no clear line between them. Beyond the garden, the monks keep bees in straw skeps lined along a low fence. Honey is precious here, sweetness in an age before sugar, medicine when mixed with herbs, a candle's light when rendered into wax. In the hush of night, the hives hum faintly with their own small life, a reminder that even in darkness the world remains restless, alive with quiet labour. Inside the monastery church you glimpse the final shadows of Compline, the last prayer before sleep. A handful of monks stand in their plain woolen habits, chanting psalms that echo off stone walls built by hands long dead. Their voices blend with the soft creak of the timber roof beams, the faint drip of water somewhere in the chill. Their Latin is old and thick on the tongue, yet carries across centuries unchanged, a reminder that the Middle Ages, for all their strangeness, reach forward in ways we often forget. You watch as the monks finish their prayers, bow heads, and slip silently away down the cold corridor to their hard, narrow cots. Outside the church, the fields wait, the village sleeps, and the fragile line between faith and survival holds steady for another night. In this world of half-remembered myth, the monastery stands as proof that even in hardship and fear, people tend to knowledge, carry hope, and leave small lanterns of wisdom burning for whoever comes next. And so, you turn back toward the village, the monastery's chant lingering in your mind like a soft echo across centuries, carrying the strange, unvarnished truth of a time far more fragile and far more quietly enduring than any tale of gleaming nights could ever tell. The monastery's last echoes fade behind you as you walk the winding path back toward the village, the night now deep and thick with the earthy scent of fields cooling under the moon. Your boots sink softly into the churned dirt where countless feet, hooves, and cartwheels have passed before you. Overhead, the stars wheel slowly on, indifferent witnesses to the quiet survival unfolding below them. As you near the village edge again, you find yourself thinking not just of monks and manuscripts, but of the countless others whose labour shapes these medieval days in ways the old chronicles rarely cared to remember. At the far edge of the settlement, the blacksmith's workshop crouches in darkness, the forge now cold but the lingering smell of iron and ash still drifting through the night air. During the day, the smith's hammer is a constant heartbeat, metal, striking metal in rhythmic bursts that echo across fields and cottages alike. Here the myth of knight's gleaming armour returns, but when you look closer, the truth proves far more practical and plain. A village smith is far less likely to craft full suits of plate than to mend ploughshares, forge nails, repair iron-bound wheels, or shape horseshoes. These everyday tools are worth more to most folk than any polished breastplate. Inside the smithy, you picture the anvil scarred with deep dents, the tools arranged in neat clutter, hammers of different sizes, tongs blackened by years of fire, bellows slumped like a sleeping beast beside the cold forge. During the day, sparks fly and sweat drips as the smith shapes iron with skilled, repetitive blows, listening for the ring that tells him the metal is true. His arms carry the history of this village's labour. Every gate hinge, every blade for harvesting, every nail that holds timber to timber when storms batter the roofs. You step outside again, drawn by the faint sound of movement behind the workshop. A figure tends to a large, heavy horse, running a hand down its flank, checking its hooves for stones. The farrier's work overlaps with the smith's, removing old shoes, shaping new ones, binding metal to hoof with careful strikes. In this world, horses are precious, beasts of burden and muscle, vital to ploughing, hauling, transport. They are not the sleek destriers of royal tournaments, but sturdy, broad-backed animals, close akin to modern draft horses than any image of knights galloping onto a battlefield in shining glory. As you watch, you sense how much this simple, daily labour binds the village together. The smith and farrier, like the carpenter, the thatcher, the spinner, form a hidden backbone that supports every other task. In the movies, these trades appear only in the background, if at all. Figures pounding iron, carrying straw, stirring dye vats, mere scenery for grander plots of kings and battles. But here, in this dark edge of the village, you see how without these people the myths could never exist. No knight rides without a shoe on his horse, no castle gate closes without iron hinges, no plough cuts soil without a sharpened blade. The wind shifts carrying the faint scent of tanned leather from the cobbler's tiny shed nearby. Inside, scraps of hide hang from pegs driven into rough beams, strips of sinew coil in a clay jar, and half-stitched boots lie waiting beside an oil lamp. In this age, shoes wear through quickly on muddy paths and rough fields, and repairs are constant. Leather must be softened with fat stitched tight with waxed thread, shaped on wooden lasts that pass from master to apprentice. Even the simplest pair of shoes tells a small story of labour, trade, and survival. You imagine the cobbler bent over his work by candlelight, muttering softly to himself as he threads an awl through stiff hide. Maybe he thinks of his family asleep in the loft above, or of debts owed to the tanner for new hides, or of gossip traded when a customer stops by with coin and a story. His hands bear the marks of his trade. Thick fingers, small